So today I want to talk about a couple of concepts that I've taken from the martial arts world that I think are really, really important when it comes to actually playing guitar as well. And again, not things I see many people talking about because they don't really carry over in an obvious way. So when it comes to fretting hand dexterity, a lot of people have a real problem with the little finger. They have a real problem with the third finger as well, because these two fingers just don't have the strength that they need to be able to fret a lot of notes. If you want to improve the strength of these fingers, you have to think a little bit outside the box, because there is really no way of just improving your grip strength so this works. You know, some people might find if they go to the gym and they spend hours and hours and hours as one of those things that you can do this with, and eventually maybe they'll get these two fingers a little bit stronger. But the downside of doing that, I actually notice from a lot of people who lift very heavy all the time who also play guitar, is that sometimes you can actually lose the dexterity of your fingers by sort of going really hard on that kind of stuff. So do you want to be doing loads of grip strength training? If you're into climbing, maybe. If you're into guitar, probably not. Those two things don't go particularly well together. So how do we get these two fingers really strong without actually strengthening them? Which sounds like a stupid question, but it's not. What happens with a lot of martial arts is that you are always told to aim past the target whenever you're trying to hit something. You never try and punch a bag and stop your fist on the bag. You always aim behind the bag in order to get the most amount of power out of what you're doing. And the same kind of thing can be applied to the fretting hand here. So if I'm taking something like, for example, let's just say I'm trying to fret this note on the B string on my little finger. What's going to happen here is that if I try and put my hand in front of the guitar and then put my fingers on the instrument like this, as you can see, this might look relatively relaxed and like relatively good technique, but also there's no power there from any of the stronger muscles in the arm. I'm not using anything to support it other than the fact that my fingers are working, which is a relatively weak motion for most people. If instead I try and think of this as, don't move my fingers, pull them onto the instrument and pull the instrument inwards a little bit so that I can actually pull my hand onto the fretboard. What ends up happening is I'm fretting this note with a little finger here. If I turn slightly more front on, you'll see it a bit better. And that's being fretted with a lot of force this way, not force coming from the grip, which is really interesting because it now feels in the same way that it does in a lot of martial arts, like I'm sort of trying to play a fretboard that's behind the guitar. I'm almost trying to play it here, not putting in loads of force into it, but basically what happens is you already start fretting the notes without actually engaging many of the muscles in the hand and in the forearm that are responsible for moving the fingers. And then all you have to do is sort of take your fingers off. So this feels a little bit more, and I think I've heard a few people talk about classical violin technique in this way. It feels more like you're sort of naturally playing and then taking your fingers off the instrument as opposed to putting your fingers on the instrument and then returning them back to neutral. That might sound like a bit of a semantic difference, but it's really not. And if you try and experiment with this, you'll find that in particular, if you can get the weight of the hand behind these two fingers, the third and the fourth, you'll find that you have a lot more strength with these kind of trills. So nice little exercise here is just to put your little finger on the instrument on one of the strings, doesn't really matter which one, and then you pull in and you stop pulling in, and that note will just be, you're just sort of hovering on that string. So it's just hovering, and I'm not even pressing it, but I am actually on it. I'm not above it, I'm on the string, and I pull in again. Kind of get the idea. You can barely see my hand moving here, and the reason is because it's not moving. What's happening is I'm sort of coming in and out very subtly from the bigger muscles with the arm like this. If I do it really exaggerated, it's something like this, and you get something like this. Can you see how A, how fast that is, and B, how little motion I'm actually using, and it looks like I've got the most amazing finger independence ever. Spoilers, finger independence is not finger independence. Finger independence is using the correct muscles to actually get the job done. So as you can see here, there's very little of that sort of finger motion going in if I'm trying to do that kind of trill. And the same thing goes for any of these fingers. If I try and do it with only fingers, you can really see that move. Whereas if I try and actually incorporate some of this motion in that, you can kind of see how A, that's faster, and B, it looks like I'm moving less, which is good. It also feels like I'm doing less with my hands, which is a really good thing because, again, avoiding tendinitis, avoiding all those problems, that feels way more comfortable to play. So if you're trying to get into this, try some trills like that. Very, very simple stuff, but it really helps you try and get that right. Now, with the picking hand, the same sort of thing applies. And this is something that, again, I found was a bit of a breakthrough for me, is that if you actually try and hit the string, a lot of the time what's happening there is you are stopping just short of the string just by some psychological mechanism in your brain, and you don't really notice yourself doing it. So one of the things that I really try and do is try and cut through it. I try and imagine that the pick is a knife and I'm sort of cutting through it into a chopping board, if that sort of makes sense. If you were sort of chopping vegetables or something, you don't aim for the top of the vegetables, you chop right through into the board, and then you stop on the board and you keep going like that. That's sort of how I think about like the picking hand. Doing that kind of stuff. It is all a sort of chopping motion, chopping the string in half, as opposed to trying to actually hit the string and play the note. So again, sounds like a semantic difference here, but it's really not, and it's really important to try these things. So again, trying it on each string, just trying to go, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, any exercises like that, really helps you just get this feeling of I'm going through the string and trying to aim past it and trying to chop it in half, as opposed to actually hit the string. Hitting the string is a really bad way of sort of trying to play the instrument, because that's not actually what you're trying to do in the first place. So relatively short video today, but hopefully that helps you get some of these things under your fingers and try and apply some concepts that are from other instruments or other disciplines that actually work really well when it comes to playing guitar. Hopefully that helps. Let me know in the comments.